next time we'll put the gavel out.
I'm going to get a small axe. I'd like to call this meeting to order and recognize that we are on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish people, of the Snuneymuxw people, whose territory includes what is now known as Cameron Island, but for generations was known as Skigwami, which means little dog. And traditionally, small white woolly dogs were raised on Cameron Island, and they mixed the dog's wool with goat's wool to make clothing and blankets, and the impact of the Europeans coming with their Hudson Bay blankets ended that tradition, and there are no more little white dogs on Cameron Island. This educational moment was brought to you by Tukas Vamsh 2018, the Hulkamanum Language Celebration, which will be held April 25th. Now on with the meeting. Trustee Higginson, Vice Chair of the Board, has an announcement.
Thank you, Trustee Robinson. So earlier today, the Board of Education announced the appointment of Assistant Superintendent Scott Saywell as the district's next superintendent and CEO. The announcement marks the final phase of an extensive process that began this past September when the Board of Education hired Go Futures Human Resources to assist in the application and hiring process. Since that time, the board, senior staff, and multiple partner groups had the opportunity to provide feedback on what experience they feel is required of the next superintendent CEO. The public was also given the opportunity to provide feedback via an online survey. The board looks forward to supporting Mr. Saywell in the implementation of his vision for success for all. I wonder if Scott wants to say anything.
I am honored and grateful for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to carrying on the momentum created by Superintendent Blaine, and looking forward to championing our vision of success for all. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any additions or deletions?
Just a quick addition under new business, the attendance at BCSTA AGM. Just a quick housekeeping because the deadline's coming up. Yes. Under new business.
And Trustee Brennan, I know is going as well, and
we'll talk about it then.
Oh,
under new business.
Oh, I apologize.
It's okay. If everybody agrees to the addition, that's okay.
Sorry, I heard it as something he should.
I have an addition as well. I'm not sure. I wasn't sure who was going first tonight, whether it was business or education, but I've asked Scott to be prepared to make his presentation that he made before the selection committee in front of either the business or the education committee meeting, depending on time.
Very good. Where do you want it?
I don't care. I mean, I just thought it would be a good idea for everyone to see the presentation that he made. I thought it was very good.
Sorry?
I was thinking, I think it seems like business.
What is your concern?
I just that this is a fairly, well, they're both fairly packed agendas in fairness. Okay.
How long is your presentation, Superintendent?
An hour.
Okay. Well, let's see if we have time at the end of this meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. So approval of the minutes. Are there any additions, deletions, or improvements?
We just need to quickly approve the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I not do that? Approval of the agenda. Trustee Higginson, Trustee Berzovich. And approval of the minutes. Are there any additions, deletions? Seeing none. Do we have to move that?
We don't usually. You can just say, are there any objections to approving it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're good that way.
Presentations, Jeremy Inchko, NDTA, and talking about the Pro D funds. Jeremy?
Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to thank John Blaine for his many years of service in the district, moving education forward. Much appreciated on behalf of the NDTA, and congratulate Scott on his appointment. Congratulations. And thank the board for allowing this presentation. It's not something we've done often in the past, but it's a chance to do something new and different and better than just handing you a piece of paper. So to go over, under collective agreement, we're required to present a summary of disbursement of the funds and some of the activities that have gone on with professional development, and I'm pleased to be able to do that today. Making a note that for some reason on the disbursement of funds that's included there, it doesn't show that the NDTA has received the funds from SE68, but in fact have received $233,775.75. So that's not zero. That did otherwise look that way, and yeah, there's one more payment to come, but that's to come. It's been exciting for me this year to be a first time as a Pro-D chair in my role as professional issues officer to see what's going on, to help develop and support professional development across the district, and we've had a number of exciting opportunities. The way I've organized things here is to highlight some of the key budget lines, some of the more major ones, and say, this is what's gone on, this is where the money's gone, and some of the good work and activities that have happened through the district. Teachers have access to individual Pro-D funds, and that makes up the vast majority of the funds that we receive from the district. We have a policy that directs where those go. They're used for professional resources and activities, and teachers by and large do that to a good extent. As I'm also learning in my role that budgets, while they are great and direct things, waiting for them to be updated and get information back from accountants takes a lot longer than I would have thought. So, more money is spent. It looks like we haven't spent a lot of money in professional development, but more has. It's a process that I'm learning and excited to be able to be part of. This year, we have made a real effort to get more money in the hands of teachers. More often, we've developed a bit of a surplus we're trying to spend down, so our budget is a deficit budget intentionally to get more money in the hands of more teachers, because one of the big things that we've had happened this year is Super Conference. On the PSA, or the Professional Specialist Association Days, one of the 5 Pro-D days that we've got in the year. Typically, we have multiple conferences all over the province where teachers go off to, and they use the Pro-D funds to get there. And unfortunately, living on a rock, it's difficult to get off the rock. And so we said, here is more money to make sure you do, because we've had those conferences, 25 of the 30-something specialist associations all combined together to create one conference called Super Conference, and it was amazing to have over 10,000 delegates at this one conference. And no longer were you, pigeonhole is the wrong word, but focusing on one specific focus. You had the opportunity to attend multiple workshops in a much broader area, and it was very well received for those who attended, those who presented. It was a great experience. So we had lots of teachers using their individual Pro-D funds to be able to access that. We also work on a 3-year cycle. For the last 9 years, this is the 3rd year of 3 3-year cycles. So every 3 years, the money can be moved forward. And so we had access to up to $1,000 individually this year for teachers who've been saving it up for something big. And we had something big, and it was really exciting to have teachers go off to do that. On top of that, we've also looked at other ways, because again, getting out of the local district and experiencing other opportunities, we've created capacity building grants. Initially, they were targeted towards international grants, and we had 2 at $2,000, and they became very popular, and we realized we have the budget to get. That's one way the teachers are getting money into their hands and using it for great purposes, and attending some fabulous conferences and activities all over the world. Sometimes all over the world means Vancouver. Sometimes all over the world means Ecuador. Those have happened in San Francisco. We've had a couple there this year. one that's on this list and one that hasn't come yet, but we've got teachers traveling. And the purpose of those grants has morphed into really being we call it capacity building now, because we're reaching out to specialties across the world, nationally and internationally, and coming back to present and share. So one of the requirements for teachers to get a capacity building grant, it's a big chunk of money, at up to $2,000 each. They come back and present. You must present, and that may be in some cases presenting at their school, but we encourage those members to come and present at District Day, come and present at schools, come and present at the Meet and Meet series, present far and wide to make sure we're building capacity and bringing in fresh ideas from other places and a new perspective, and it's going well. And we've increased that budget line from $4,000 to $25,000, and we're getting close to it this year because it's very popular. As times are expensive and people are getting more involved in different ways and having more opportunities, we're trying to support teachers in doing that. So that's been very successful. What's also successful is our District Day. We just had last week, and that's why we delayed this. We're required to present to the board this January, but we asked to say, hey, can we talk about District Day and move this a little bit later so that we can include some of the information from District Day. And in the package, there's a list of over 50 workshops that were presented locally, mostly by local facilitators. I think we had about 30 local facilitators present. We had local experts, and so we get people to become or get to share their expertise to others in the district, and sometimes out of the district we do have some people come into that aren't necessarily School District 68 teachers to come and participate in the District Day and the workshops that are provided. Super popular. It's a highlight of the year for many people, a chance to network, a chance to experience something different, a chance to try out, meet new people, and move their practice forward. But when they do that, those teachers who are presenting kind of miss their Prody. It's certainly beneficial to present. It's a great experience as a presenter, but they miss the opportunity to go present somewhere else. So we provide funds to teachers to go and do alternative professional development another day. So we create what's called their facilitators account. Teachers are effectively funded for a day and a half if they're presenting, or sorry, a full day. If they're presenting half a day, they get a full day. So it's half a day to present and half a day to prepare. And then those who are presenting for a full day get a full day release plus a half a day to prepare for that. And that's what that facilitators account comes from. Collaboration is a huge part of the culture of our district, and it's moving forward in many positive ways. It's happening as well through professional development, through professional learning groups. We have a number of groups that have applied for funds, sometimes for release time, sometimes for resources and materials, when they want to look at specific topics. We have groups that get together and really drill down into good practice or explore new practice. And you see we've got the budget line for that and a number of groups. It's really interesting to look at those groups and the professional learning partnerships, which is just more personal. It's two teachers getting together to look at their practice, look at other opportunities, and really focus. Those ones tend to zero down on more specific topics, but looking at the professional learning groups, looking at the capacity building grants, looking at District Day, a lot of topics really focused on social emotional learning. It's become an area of focus. I don't want to say an area of need. It's always been an area of need, and it always will be an area of need. But it's become a really conscious area of focus for a lot of our teachers, and we're seeing fewer and fewer participants in workshops for coding, for example. While that's been really popular in the past, where it was introduced in the curriculum, and people said, I need to learn about that. Okay, people had a chance to look at that. But the ongoing part of social emotional learning is become really popular, or as I said, a real area of focus. And you see more and more of the professional development going in that direction. And I suspect that specifically or more broadly will be the theme of next year's District Day. We put out a survey recently to ask, what are your interests for the theme for next year, and that was a popular response. And again, that last one, the professional learning partnerships, I said, I think I probably said it all on that, but we can look at some of the topics that are there. Again, I've included the budget, included the sessions and facilitators. We have a number of wonderful people in our district that presented excellent workshops. And then the list of professional specialist associations and their acronyms is also included. There are no acronyms in education, none whatsoever. But that's what I've got.
Questions?
So this is a really impressive list. It's really interesting to look at this stuff. Thank you for including it, and also to the local presenters for their time. I'm wondering, as well, in the professional learning partnerships and groups that you have, how do we determine, or how do you guys determine or know the impact that these sessions have on practice? Is there any collection of data, any like pre-post, any kind of reflection?
We get a summary from the groups. They submit a summary, basically what did you focus on, what did you learn, what are your key ideas, and it's really left at that. But there's no quantification of it.
Do we link the like the professional learning sessions that they take? Is it linked back to something like a personal or professional growth plan that shows where people are at in their, like during this transformation, which is, you know, a really big deal for people, and teachers are generally doing an awesome job at this huge task. I just wonder if we link it back to anything like that. Do we have anything in place like that?
Informal.
Okay.
Along those lines, I mean, we do expect teachers to be professionals. They are professionals working in this profession, but we leave the accountability beyond that to them to know what they need. The popularity of accessing all these various grants shows to me that people are being professional and they're recognizing their areas of needs, areas of passion to dig deeper, and so that's good enough accountability for me. Because they do have to apply, when they apply there is a plan in place, what it's going to be used for and why, and then a summary at the end. But do we require any formal link to a growth plan? No.
Steve Berzovich?
Thank you. You might have said it, and I might have missed it, but the meet and eats, which I had been invited to, and I missed it because of the night. You know how many people approximately were attending those?
No, I haven't been to one, unfortunately. No.
Curious. Yeah, because they looked really good.
I would say about 100.
Anecdotally.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, very well attended. We have people going above and beyond, for sure.
Is it? Yeah, that's right. Just for clarification, meet and eats are in service that we provide.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It
doesn't
it's
come out
up-
of this money.
No, it doesn't.
Apologies, and you're correct. I did forget, and that's why.
But we do.
Yeah.
Professional Development Committee does encourage people to go and present for that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Trustee Higginson?
So all the professional learning groups and the lists that you have here are great. I'm wondering where does Nutmeg Talat fit into this?
That's right. Talat, as my understanding, is an advisory group, and so they're providing input and they can make recommendations.
Okay, and then that's what you guys then act on, if you want, the
Yes.
recommendations to
Yeah.
create this,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Is it working?
So far.
Okay.
Yes, Superintendent is next.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy, for your report. It's helpful, and I certainly do know the amount of work that it takes to put on these events, because I've observed them in the past. My first question was actually around Nutmeg Talat as well, and you're new to that committee, I believe, this year, correct?
I'm not on the committee.
Oh,
Isabel Lavoie is. She's
your other protege, right?
Yes.
Right. And I'm just curious on your observation of it as to how, because I also noticed that there's no indicator within any of this that Nutmeg Talat is active and et cetera, and I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can continue to dovetail some of our thoughts into that, and that may be putting you on the spot here, and that's fine. And you don't have to respond to that, but it is our thoughts that, and I appreciate that it is advisory. But the other piece to it is it was also part of. I know there's been some commitment and et cetera with the NDT and ourselves around the district day.
Yes.
And your continued support of inviting ENSA and CUPE there has been something quite new. And I just want to make sure, again, the odd reference to our involvement as well is always a good way to go. It's just just a piece of thought there, right? In that regard, I don't know if you want to make a response to that or not. We feel that we're going in a good direction with Nuts Not Tatlak and its influence on things, and we're hoping the NDTA feels the same way, that it's a good venue for those types of conversations.
Yeah. If I can respond, I believe so as well. I know there's some great work coming out of Nuts Not Tatlak. Not all of it is directly related into directing and necessarily facilitating professional development of only teachers, but there's great work going on there. From what I see, most of it is more high-level work, but we don't really have a formal way for the advisory part to happen necessarily. It's kind of ad hoc, I think, often, but appreciated when it does happen, and very valued because we've got a diverse group in that group.
And I'm just going to bring back a little bit because you may or not be aware, there has been, in the past probably 7 years, I've heard on several occasions the board's interest on being involved and understanding in those types of things, and Nuts Not Tatlak was a place where we began to hopefully have those types of conversations and et cetera, and the board's concerned around ensuring that monies are being spent in an appropriate way and those types of things. So that was also a venue that we could assure the board that we were all in some common alignment around professional development, in service, and all those types of things. And so it was in response to some of the board's requests as well in the past. I'm just
Secretary Treasurer.
Oh, I wanted to say thank you because it's great to have you come and report out in this way. In the last few years, I haven't seen that, so it's wonderful that you're doing it. 2 questions. When you have the updated budget, would you mind sending a copy to Karen? And my second question was around the capacity building, and you were saying that teachers will come back and they'll present in various ways. Would teachers, or could you have a discussion around teachers coming and presenting their learning, their professional development to the board?
Absolutely.
I just think that would be amazing.
Yeah. Okay.
Trustee Higginson.
So this is sort of like a for information dig for public, because this is such a misunderstood topic out in the public. And I think I really appreciate all the things that you've put into this because it's really informative, I think, and I think it's a really important topic that we, really start talking about publicly. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions for information purposes, and we can just have the public discussion about it. My understanding is that this number, the money that's in here, comes from a percentage of the operating budget. Am I correct? Do we, or do teachers,
a
percentage of teachers' salary?
Percentage of September 30th budget teacher salary, and then also a percentage of the previous year's TTOC budget.
Okay.
So there's 2 sources.
So it comes out of the operating money. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you can say, no, that's too easy. I totally want this to be like, I want everyone to understand how this all happens. Because this, to be honest, one of the reasons why I really want to dig in and have this conversation here in public on the cameras is because if there's one topic that I get asked a million times about, it's, why is my kid not in school today?
Yeah.
And I, really, I have this conversation all the time, and it'd be, what would be great? Let's go watch the tape. and we can just if it's too simplistic to say that it's a certain percentage of our operating budget, then feel free to clarify and get into the minutia that we need to, so that people can understand how the professional learning for their child works.
No, it is that simple.
Okay.
Percentage of September 30th's payroll and a percentage of the previous year's total TOC budget. That's where the money comes from. It's very clear that the money comes from the board. That's why I feel the responsibility to be here and answer some questions as best I can. I am new at it, but doing my best. And recognize that, that money goes to supporting teachers to do ongoing improvement of their practice and moving teaching and learning forward.
Awesome. Can I follow up on this? Thanks. You're doing great for being new at it. This is one of the best reports we've had, so I love it.
That sounds like one so it's a low bar.
But it's a good one. So then, if it there's a percentage that comes from our operating budget, and this is the board question, is there a direct link or a requirement for a direct link that this professional learning be connected to our strategic plan?
No.
Okay.
No, indirectly, yes, we have multiple advisory committees. NASMAT Tadalat provides advice. We have a joint committee that provides, again, direction, but there is autonomy for professional development. Yes. However, input is absolutely welcomed and encouraged. We have a number of us on a committee that meets not terribly regularly, but enough when we need specific guidance. And again, reporting back.
Awesome. Okay, one more.
Go for it.
Okay, autonomy aside. Autonomy aside,
You're
which
the
is
teacher.
Yeah.
which I get that, or non-requirements aside, is it happening? Like when you guys are sitting down to plan this, are you looking at the strategic plan? Are you looking at the directions, or is? And I'm sure what I think probably happens is that the needs that the teachers have are probably directly related to the strategic plan anyway. It's probably happening, but is there an implicit time that it happens, or is?
Implicitly, yes. Explicitly, no.
Okay, implicitly. I used the wrong word. Thank you. Okay. I think that's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, and
Thank you. This is great.
it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Superintendent.
Thank you. First off, Jeremy, thank you. I didn't mean to put you in the hot seat there. It's a good conversation though, right?
It absolutely is.
Yeah, and yeah. Okay, so talking about learning and how we're improving in learning, the Department of Learning Services would like to present to the board the last presentation of the series. And so I'll introduce who we got first. Bob and Scott, I think, if I recall. And I see a whole bunch of people getting up. Robin and Laura. Oh, Laura's going to the mic first.
We thought we'd change it up.
Well, I was just reading the PowerPoint.
Good evening, welcome. Recognize we're on the traditional territory of the Nanaimo people. We are, oh, do I have a clicker? We are in the second year of a 3-year plan, and so what we thought we would do is just take a quick look back at what we presented last year. Stop me at any time, or any of us, if you have any questions. And then just bring you forward to our plan this year. So just a brief review. We spoke briefly about this ministry slide that they brought out the summer before last, to recognize that as Canada, we do pretty well internationally. So we've seen the Conference Board of Canada 2014, which was the latest at that time. We were third best among the other jurisdictions, which are 16 peer countries at that time. Japan and Finland were 1 and 2, we were third. And then below that you can see that as a province, we do very well on the program for international student assessment called PISA. And that was the latest results at the time, 2015. Just recently I saw that, as they do, there were some Dover students who would be writing the test this year. So first in reading, second in science, and sixth in math in 2015. An improvement over a second in reading, third in science, and 10th in math. So as a province, we do very well internationally. We talked just briefly about some of the factors that influence us in Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools. We talked about our grad rate. You can see on the right side there. Last year it was 72.6, or 2015-16 I should say, and then 16-17 a little bit higher. And you've seen this slide before. I just talked about the risk indicators, and that we have a very special population of vulnerable students in our district. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. This is our strategic plan. At the time, I was introducing 2 new goals to our strategic plan that are reconciliation and organizational effectiveness and accountability. Talked a little bit about the what we call the learning framework and the alignment between what the Ministry of Education does in their goals, what our strategic plan does, all through to our learning framework that the Directors of Instruction will talk a little bit more about later. Hand it over to Bob to talk a little bit about RTI.
Very good. Thank you. Good evening. This time last year, I flashed this same slide to just bring back to the forefront of your mind our response to intervention framework. We are still working with this framework. It guides us in the work that we do. And thanks to our partner, the NDTA, survey results from teachers in the school district affirmed what we know is that we need to continue to focus on our Tier 1 and Tier 2 strategies. We are going to be focusing on differentiating instruction and universal design for learning. We're also going to take a look at Tier 3, which you see is that little red triangle there at the top. Those are the services that we provide for our intensive needs, and more to come on that in Year 2. So, with beginning Year 2, we are very pleased that we are in a position in our school district to continue our plan. This is Year 2 of a 3-year plan. We have witnessed progress this past year, and we have identified areas that we're going to continue to work on, and we have also identified a few new ones that we're going to tell you about. So we look at this as staying the course. We are going to continue our focus on student learning with a renewed focus on improving student success and, of course, increasing our student graduation rates. This graph you've seen before, it focuses in on an inquiry that we are working on in learning services. So the research tells us that literacy is the best predictor of a person's life success. We also know that research tells us that if students are not reading by the beginning of grade 4, that they're less likely to graduate. So this graph gives us the fire that we need, or the impetus, to continue with our desire to work on our department's work to increase our students' literacy rates. I also want you to know that what we look at when we see this is that there is an obvious connection between grade 4 reading and the 6-year completion rate. And we're taking that assumption and we are building our inquiry on that. So if we increase our students' success in reading at grade 4, we're expecting to see an increase in our 6-year graduation rates. We have always talked about our EDI data, but we've never actually given you a visual for it. This is the map of our school district region, and the color codes are percent vulnerable on one or more scales. The scales are listed in the box, hopefully on your PowerPoint printout that you can see them a little more clearly. Physical health and well-being, social competence, emotional maturity, language and cognitive development, communication skills, and general knowledge. So if you look at the most vulnerable in our school district is the darkest color, but you'll see the lightest color, well, or no color, 0%. We don't see a whole lot of that scattered throughout our district. This mapping of our neighborhoods tells us that we have student vulnerability at high percentage rates across our district. So we need to focus on that. So vulnerability, diversity, and complexity exists throughout our school district. So we don't only use the EDI to help us in that. We use the vulnerability index from NCFD. We look at report card data. We look at the results, results of our Aboriginal student population. We look at FSA, and of course we look at the 6-year completion rate. If you look at our school district, you know that we have 5 distinct communities in our district: Nanaimo, Ladysmith, Landsville, Cedar, Gabriola. We have 3 land-based First Nations communities and 5 Aboriginal communities overall. Within our community, we have 3 detachments of the RCMP. And above all, to help us in supporting our students, we have excellent relationships with our community partners in all of those communities.
Well, just before you go on, can you take it back to the graph? I just wanted to point something out that, and it's more of a question.
This one or this one?
That one, please. Grade four reading rates right here are the grade 12 reading rates right here. Okay? So walk through this with me. Grade 4 reading rates the following year, 2008. We had a decline in our grade 12 grad rate. Walk through this again, you have an arrow coming down, and you have a gradual arrow coming down. So I'm not suggesting that it's only possibly an indicator of why we experience what we experience, along with everything else, right? And so if in fact, as the discussion comes from learning services around using our grade 4 reading rates as an indicator and a place for early intervention, you know, I think that is another supporting document that suggests that it's it possibly is a true piece of information. Sorry for the interruption. Thanks. Yeah.
Well, every time we show this slide or a slide concerning vulnerability, I have to show this slide, and who better to talk about some of John Hattie's work? Look at me, Stephanie. But
I'm too busy looking at the data.
The metadata.
So, I'll just share a little bit about this. I've shown this sort of information before. I do it because when we show sort of vulnerability, we don't want to make an excuse that for our students coming to us out of poor socioeconomic circumstances, because there are many things that counteract that in the classroom, and we can't predict where a student is going to end up by their circumstances at any given time. So one of the things I always compare it to is collective teacher efficacy. The D means effect size, or Cohen's D means effect size, which is 1.57, which is the largest effect size. It's massive. A 0.4 effect size is the typical learning that a student will do in 1 year. So a 1.57 is massive. Collective teacher efficacy speaks to the idea that it's simple, but if all teachers believe on a staff that kids can achieve at high levels, regardless of things like socioeconomic status or other indicators of vulnerability, then that will counteract that, right? And we see it in the research. So I just, I don't want to make any assumptions about what people are feeling when we show slides about vulnerability, because it's never an excuse. This is, what slide is, what is it? So this is just some of the, an overview of some of the indirect initiative that we've been working on as well. So I'm just going to name a few that we will continue to be working on next year. HR recruitment, orientation, onboarding, and mentorship of new teachers. We've had failure to fills just about every day for DTOCs in the last little while, and we are busily recruiting teachers. Teacher and principal growth plans and evaluations we continue to work on. Restoration of collective agreement language, LOU 17, we will be continuing to work on, and into 2019 where the contract is up for bargaining. Consolidation, of course, of Rutherford Elementary, the NDSS turf field, continued work on policies and procedures, some of the work that Bob's doing. Again, some of the work that Bob's doing developing our learning services website.
So like last year, again this year I want to flash the RTI triangle. I want to stress that Tier 1 is classroom instruction, and we really want to increase the strategies that are used there to educate all students in the inclusive environment that we promote in our school district. Tier 2 is a small group intervention for students. It's for those students who need a little bit more. The rest of the class continue on with what they're doing. And then, of course, focusing in on Tier 3, this was from the survey. We heard from teachers that they don't really understand what Tier 3 is or how to access Tier 3 programs. So just for your knowledge, this is a continued focus for us. Tier 3 at the school level could be one-to-one EA support for some children who really require that intensive intervention. Tier 3 at the school level could also be a mental health clinician coming into the school from our community and working with the student in our setting, one-to-one intensive support. Those are examples. At the district level, we have programs like the FLOW program, Family Outreach Learning and Wellness. The FLOW program has a focus on students who have mental health concerns, and they're in a program to build their capacity to cope and to work through those mental health concerns. We have other programs like VAST and junior learning alternatives that are also Tier 3. In the community, we have programs in Victoria and in Burnaby that are Tier 3 programs for the province. We often have students who enter into those programs. They're like a 6-week duration or an 8-week duration. And they really focus on a multidisciplinary approach. And so it's us, our teachers working together with our community partners, making the referrals to those provincial Tier 3 programs. So really important that we continue to articulate that, and we'll be working on that again next year.
So the context has been set well by both Bob and Scott in terms of Nanaimo Ladysmith. Its geographic regions, diversity, the complexities, the vulnerability. They've given you a bit of a snapshot of some of those indirect initiatives that we've been working on that are directly connected to the learning agenda. And of course, all of this is within the context of RTI, always. So Robin and I will focus your attention now a little bit more on this familiar graphic around the teaching and learning components of the Department of Learning Services, and give you a little bit of a quick overview of what's been going on over this past year, although it's only March.
And just to make a point that the learning framework that it used to be called is now the NLPS Learning Objectives. Okay?
All right, curriculum and instruction. The subcategories within this objective are a big focus on, of course, the new curriculum, Aboriginal education, and K-9 reading. I am at the Oscars now. Right?
And the envelope goes to...
The nominees are. So this year to review, we've been, of course, maintaining our momentum around the K-9 curriculum, and we've been sort of inundated with the 10 through 12. It's a little more complex. We've had all sorts of neat events occurring targeting these 4 learning objectives and building community. We've had a principal series, or continuing to have a principal series around reconciliation. The Focus Schools initiative is still ongoing. Aboriginal education is undergoing a massive equity scan whilst attempting to build the Aboriginal Strategic Plan. And there's been a focus on educational technology in the form of ADST, Applied Design Skills and Technology, as well as secondary careers.
And I'll just share with you about our graduation plan. I know that a couple months ago, or about a month ago, we talked about the new grad plan. It's really focusing on careers 8 through 12. I truly believe that is the transformation that's going to be able to occur in our secondary schools around that particular area. And in addition, just to take note that we've been piloting some of the new courses from 10, 11, and 12 the past couple of years, but truly next September, the grade 10 will need to be implemented overall. So there's a number of different areas around English language arts, as well as English First Peoples, as well as social studies. So we have that across the district, and I have to say that I want to acknowledge the teachers who have actually put their 2 feet forward and actually embraced the new curriculum well before we needed to. So that's ongoing. And I think I just want to make that one last point around the design thinking team. It's a great group that we've created. A leadership team who is really looking at grade 4 to grade 9 around developing scope and sequence around computational thinking skills.
And design.
Yes, very exciting.
Assessment and reporting, and the subcategories here are communicating student learning, which used to be called reporting, still is, half the time. A focus on formative assessment, and of course a focus on our NLPS district reading assessment. And year in review, major focus on communicating student learning. We're still learning and growing and still trying to educate and the public, parents around all of these movements. The intention from the ministry, my understanding, is we are to hear some sort of final mandate around communicating student learning between January and March, is what we were told. So we're awaiting that, and then we've got our own policy and procedure sort of work that's sort of sitting in the wings waiting for that ministry nod. We have a district assessment reporting and review committee in the works. Robin and I work with DPAC representatives as well as some teaching staff, and we have a reporting task force as well. We have a continued focus on the reading assessment. That hasn't waned at all. We're still working on the sort of the knowledge use, understanding of the data of that assessment. We are just in the beginning stages of shifting or adding additional focus around numeracy or math. We used to have a district assessment that we used to call the DMA, District Math Assessment, which needs to be updated to match the new curriculum, and it will take quite a while. It's pretty intensive. So we're piloting the grade 6 one at the moment, but they're working diligently to sort of increase that so we can shift into a numeracy focus. We're continuing to learn around formative assessment, and our NLPS reading assessment assists us in that learning. We've implemented FreshGrade district-wide. We've got the MyEd BC Family Portal, which Robin will speak to a little more specifically, and education is really starting at the secondary level around standards-based assessment.
Okay. So I'm going to back up just a little bit to the NLPS reading assessment. We'll be looking at updating and making that a little bit more contemporary and more modern around reading passages. So that's currently underway. I do want to give a bit of a shout out to John Barsby Secondary School, who piloted our numeracy assessment in January for the first time. So they were one of the schools that were chosen from across the province to pilot that. So they did an excellent job, and they're giving us a bit of a preview into how we will actually do that in the future with all of our schools starting in June. And then also with regard to the platforms around sharing information, we have the MyEd BC Family Portal being piloted out of Wellington Secondary School. They've done a great job in certainly forging forward, because next September we would hope that at all secondary schools from 8 to 12 we will have the family portals opened, and so that will be an excellent communication tool for all of our families. And then lastly, the standards-based assessment education, we will be able to use MyEd BC, utilizing that particular tool in order for us to support quality assessment, formative assessment practices, but utilizing a tool for later on to report on.
And the hope and the, oh yeah.
That's a question now, or you want to wait?
Oh, good, yeah.
Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Okay. I'm excited to hear about FreshGrade and the MyEd portal. So I have two questions on this. What will be the difference between the MyEd portal and FreshGrade?
Well, currently the MyEd might have a capacity for some kind of e-portfolio. MyEd they're not able to be as responsive to us as a district at the moment, so to sort of personalize that, I think it's going to take quite some time, whereas FreshGrade, we can personalize it, we can go with FreshGrade, we can go with it running. That, and we're trying to, there's so much work to do with MyEd, as well as getting secondary reporting, and then the standards base and the parent portal. The next piece is we hope to move elementary report cards, communicating student learning, to MyEd, and out of this, our ancient ERC, our electronic report card system that we have. So we still have a whole bunch of learning and transition to do at that point. I think I'll wait it out a little bit with the e-portfolio in MyEd. It's not at the moment fitting our needs, and I think because we don't have as much control over it, it's going to be a little more arduous.
Awesome.
And I'll also respond a little bit that Fresh Grade is not about the reporting piece, it's about, communicating student learning with families. But when it comes to the MyEd piece, we can actually, at a system-wide level at secondary schools, actually push out the report cards. So we're not having to print them. So it's just a much more efficient, beautiful tool that you wouldn't actually have to print 1,400 report cards, let's say, at Door Bay, but you could actually push it out to parent and they can look at it and print it at home if they choose to print it.
You don't forget about the filing of the 14.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's really quite an efficient tool. It's an area, a platform that we haven't really utilized fully. So this is the second act of the student information system.
Trustee Kindler.
So I'm very excited to hear about Fresh Grade, and I know that it's a commercial product, and so therefore it's a tad more responsive and robust than provincially mandated product. But my question, and especially as a parent, I guess, because the communication back and forth with teachers is like key. And I've seen Fresh Grade sort of exercise at its full potential, which is extremely exciting. But I realize that it's going to take a certain amount of onboarding with teachers in order to participate at that level. So I guess my curiosity is more along the lines of, is there a minimum participation level requirement or expectation for teachers with Fresh Grade? And if so, what would that be?
Eventually, the hope is that we'll have 100% participation. What we've said this first year is that, a couple pieces, is that if people are sort of working towards this, that the old paper portfolio is still going to be okay. We're not going to force them this year. We also had some folks who had really dived into using Google. And we've been supporting that and our GAIF projects and all those pieces. So some of them are doing beautiful things with an e-portfolio system, I can't remember what it's called, in Google.
Right.
So we were trying to let the district know that we would be financially supporting this one. But I think our main priority is how you've described this, these beautiful communications with parents. Right now, not irregardless, but not forcing everyone to be on the same platform, more around the quality of these communications at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Just another quick one on the Fresh Grade or communication electronically. When we're implementing this, are we providing support to teachers on how to do it in a meaningful way?
Yes.
I used the example of a friend whose child's not in our district. Thank God. So she showed me her Fresh Grade. She's like, what is this stuff about? And basically she was just getting stuff pushed out constantly to her. But she had I said, well, do you have a comparator? Do you understand? And it was just like a whole bunch of pictures of their kids' work with nothing that said where they sat. And I'm just wondering if we're making sure that people are using it in a meaningful way.
Yes. So when we started, it was sort of twofold. One part of the fold was this quality and what is a portfolio? What do we use it for? Is it this catch-all for every single thing that I do in my classroom, or is it something else? Yeah. So that was a key component of the implementation. The second part was just actually trying to learn how to use it. What is this and how do I use it? And so as more people are learning to use it, we can get over that technical piece. We at the very beginning started with criteria around what makes a good post. We're pushing that harder now. And so what we're doing now, what the learning coordinators are working on now, is actually building examples of portfolios with actual student work, with photos, etc., to show sort of, does it meet the criteria? What is the purpose? Why are we including it? Also to, I think maybe take a little bit of the workload off. Like there are some folks out there who are doing a lot, and I think it's beautiful. We don't want them to pull that back if they don't want to, but we also know that we can kind of think about the criteria of what we're putting in there, and we don't have to be posting things daily or weekly necessarily.
Thanks.
And I think also with regard to our training model, we were looking at a bit of a train-the-trainer kind of concept that we've used in the past. But this year, we've really taken note that we really need to go into the classrooms and release some teachers to work closely with our coordinators in how to use MyEd or Fresh Grade, not only using the Mondays PLC in-service time, but also working together collaboratively on how to do that. So it really is a lot of learning for many of our teachers in terms of not only just using the platform, but doing it well.
Thank you. Building a collaborative culture. The subcategories here are PLCs are district-wide professional learning communities and collaborative inquiry. So of course, we're continuing to grow capacity on these two topics, on inquiry, our own collaborative inquiry model, as well as PLCs, with a bit of a push around using student data to inform these PLC times, right? We have been, well, we always have been, but we're always looking at supporting our principal, vice principal grouping here. And so we've this year built sort of more time with them and more focused time with our PVPs to support them and to build networks with each other and just for the groups to stay informed. We continue all of our inquiry work, both provincially and locally, by submitting a whole bunch of inquiry questions to our provincial networks and attending provincial learning opportunities around inquiry. That's continuing, so we've got provincial funding coming in and the district matches that funding for these inquiries that are happening in our schools.
And how many do we have participating in May?
Oh, in May?
Yes, at Moy.
Probably a good 15, 20.
Yes. Teams who have submitted applications.
We have over 30 inquiry grant applications that we've submitted from this district, which is probably more than any other district in the province. Nutsmut Tablet. This year we've had two focus areas. The first is we decided to build a collaborative joint project together, and that's around teacher mentorship. The second is we are building a web presence. The original intention and the current intention is to have a housing mechanism so that all of the joint stakeholder partner groups on this committee can put their professional learning opportunities in one place. So that's PENSA, that's NDTA, that's the district, that's VIU. We're still working on CUPE to bring CUPE along as well. So in that housing mechanism around it, we built a website as well, and it will be hopefully our hope is that it will be a go-to place around effective professional learning.
And I'm just going to comment a little bit more on the teacher mentorship program. It's inclusive of onboarding and orientation. So we've had about 3 teacher orientation meetings set up, and our last one, we actually included all of our new hires. So it included a groundskeeper and a person who, I'm trying to think of what they do out there, and our EA staff. Yes, that's an arborist. And so we weren't sure how they were going to embrace this orientation, that we had to adjust and widen to be inclusive. But you know, they were keen. It was a nice little table group that works underneath the director, Mr. Sable. Yeah. And so we've been doing a lot of that work as well. So it's just good stuff. But the teacher mentorship program, we're going to look at finalizing it and looking over one of our partners. I would have to say that I want to do a little bit of a shout out to VIU. We have 3 people who sit there as a partner with us, and they're doing excellent research and work with regard to teacher mentorship. So we're looking forward to really unveiling that this spring and really getting underway next fall.
I'll mention Meet and Eat Here Again, and I mention Here Again because it also is a nod to building this culture of collaboration, having good attendance, all sorts of folks coming together to learn together. We've started, we'll have tomorrow night will be our second of 3 parent information night sessions, which the first one's beautiful. We had that one at John Warsby last week. Website development under collaborative culture, because we're continuing to grow our internal, in large part, portals so that we can connect, so that teachers, principals, whomever have a more consistent place to connect and for the relevant information that they're needing. And then this includes our NLPS learning portal, which should be all things teaching and learning, our health and safety portal, the leadership portal, and I've mentioned the Nutsmut Tablet website. And secondary. And
then we have our secondary learning leaders meeting every other month. That includes all of our teacher leaders from across all of our secondary schools and our learning alternative sites. And about 75 come together with all of their school-based leaders. And so we just had our 3rd one last week, and it's just a beautiful collaborative event. And so we're learning together as leaders across the secondary schools.
Safe, caring, and inclusive schools, with subcategories being equitable access to educational programs, safe schools, social responsibility, and social justice. So we're working within this objective under the belief that everything we do must be educative, preventative, and restorative, and that's both in practice and response. So the main heading, one of the main headings here is social justice. So there's been the development of a district social justice strategic plan. We're currently having a full implementation of our SOGI AP 347, fully implemented by June. And we're supporting schools with the implementation of admin procedures that follow within this policy. Within inclusion, we have a continued implementation of our inclusion policy, which we're extremely proud of. We're very proud of that policy. Under the heading of personal safety and sexual health education, we're growing our own understanding around sexual health education. We have an NLPS mental health and addictions strategic plan, and it's been collaboratively built with our community partners, and their focus areas are still to be determined. It's fairly recent. So during this review, this year in review, we've noticed about four major themes that have sort of risen up and risen to the surface. And these four major areas are what sort of will direct us for this coming 2018-19 school year. That isn't to say we're dropping anything that we've just covered. We're either kind of tweaking or growing or enhancing, but it has caused us a lot of deep reflection and noticing both anecdotal, qualitative, quantitative information that we've been observing. So these four areas have sort of bubbled up. Aboriginal education, early intervention, learning environments, the need for learning environments that are both equitable and inclusive, and this notion of secondary transformation. And I will take a quick pause here to just reiterate what both Bob and Scott mentioned around the context of NLPS, because it really has informed these four themes. Just sort of how diverse, kind of complex we are in such a small geographic area. With the vulnerabilities really make things interesting. And so this really has caused us to reflect deeply and notice these four areas. So, as this is a budget presentation, Aboriginal education has its own budget, and it's not normally included during this time. But my thinking here is that what we're noticing is that a lot of what the needs are within Aboriginal education are aligning completely with what the needs are in the district. And I want to sort of bring that to our attention, because I think that over time these processes probably shouldn't be as separate as they are now, and I think that we will begin to weave them together. So for your information, many of the financial commitments from ABED align directly with or woven to the learning services learning objectives. They're really close to being one and the same. And ABED is seeing the same growth areas that are necessary, like early intervention, as well as the learning environments that are equitable and inclusive. In secondary transformation, same needs. So this will inform throughout the building of the strategic plan for ABED. This process is going to be more closely aligned and more closely woven together. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to mention that, and that ABED will too focus on early intervention, focused school support, secondary transformation, community engagement, and bringing together this strategic plan, which the strategic plan, of course, will give us more specific information.
I just really want to acknowledge and appreciate the way that you are really, truly weaving it through. Mm-hmm. With that, with what you just told us, it is, a word and a term that is thrown around a lot, and it's a real struggle to do. And so I have such gratitude, especially with our board goal of reconciliation, that we have this amazing team of professionals who's able to actually make it happen. I know that it's easy to say it, but I actually know that you guys will do it. So I really appreciate the way you just spoke those words, because it really shows that it is woven all the way through, and that's the goal. That's so important, and to see it happening and starting to happen rather than still struggling with it, it really gives me lots of confidence that we're going to be able to work on that number that we are also concerned about. So thank you.
And I think there's a sense, kind of speaking out of script here, but I think there's a sense of safety, I think, finally, within Aboriginal education, to let go a little bit, because it's scary stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there's that sense that it's a board goal, that there is a sense of collective ownership, and I think that has allowed this reading to occur. Like that sort of fertilization of the ground has taken a long time, but I think we're kind of finally here.
Awesome.
Which is really satisfying.
And I do want to make a comment at the teacher leader meeting at the secondary level. Reconciliation is the topic, and they want more. And so on our fourth one, we will be really focusing in on some of the resources that we have been able to acquire through FINESC. And so we will be able to embed it across the curricular areas in a way that with fidelity. So we're quite excited about that.
So the next area that has really resonated is this notion of early intervention. And we know that the earlier's achievement data is connected to later data. Both Bob and John spoke to this. We know that it's connected to graduation rates, and graduation rates, it's a number, but it's purpose, dignity, and options. It gives our kids life chances, and that's always constantly at the forefront of our mind. So the research also tells us that early intervention, you can target the trajectory and have more impact earlier versus later. So if a child can't read in grade 2, it's very different when they can't read in grade 9. So because of that, our hope is to expand the Focus Schools work. And I do believe you have a link, you've probably seen it already, the Focus Schools report, but you'll have a link to that, to some of the more specific data, but it's working. And when John sort of outlined that longitudinal story a little bit, in 8 years' time, it's going to look very different, and probably sooner than that. So we'd like to expand the Focus Schools initiative around the areas of leadership enhancement, reading teacher support, and learning support resources, as well as a focus on using data to inform our practice.
Can I ask a question about that? So when you say expand around leadership, can you expand?
Yes. So it's administration, FTE in large part, to allow a principal the flexibility of being able to manage and lead a school, and then have the choice and the ability to go into classrooms, co-plan, co-teach if they need to, and support their staff around teaching and learning more flexibly. And then, of course, with the complexities that we've mentioned, the complexities, the vulnerabilities, their crises, all those sorts of things, just having that little bit more flexibility and being able to deal with some of those things and not have to be necessarily tied to a classroom 2 days a week. Yeah.
Yes.
Through the chair, thinking about the leadership support, so that also includes supports for social and emotional supports for students so that they can be in the classroom. Because a lot of our kids that are vulnerable are really struggling with things that aren't connected to their learning, and then it impedes their learning. So is that something that we're looking at included in that?
Absolutely, across the board. What we hope is if a principal is released of teaching responsibilities and has to be in a certain room for a certain amount of time, they are then more responsive to whatever the needs are of that school. And if that primarily is social emotional, if that's reading, if that whatever those things are, probably all of them, they have more flexibility and more time actually to deal with that, or to sit down and have that longer conversation with the parent, right, and they can or what have you. It's very complex, difficult right now when you're teaching, say for example, 2 days a week.
Bill? Okay. So we currently have 4 focus schools. Are you looking at expanding the number of schools, and how many would that be?
We'd like to expand to potentially to a total of about 16.
Okay. Thank you.
The things you just talked about with the leadership in the schools is something that I think is enhanced for sure some of those issues at the focus schools, but it is also an issue across the district. So you're talking about providing that leadership support to 16 schools, but I would really love it if we could find some time somewhere down the road to expand that so that all of our school-based leaders have the time to support their staff the way that they need to, and to be real educational leaders in this time when it is there's so much change happening, that to have that person who's able to focus on leadership in the building, especially educational leadership, not just firefighting, I think would make such a huge difference to our students and our staff.
Thank you. So just on the admin piece, I think the essence of this is we're going to expand as much as we can based on the budget. And but one of the goals involved in this, it's kind of two birds with one stone again, in the sense of dealing and working with early intervention, but at the same time the board was very clear earlier on in our conversations over the past years of trying to increase our admin time in elementary schools, that all schools have at least a full-time principal. And so we believe that we can get very close to that, if not accomplish that when we present the budget strategies around that.
That makes me happy.
All right, equitable, inclusive learning environments. We're speaking about secondary schools currently right now. Here's what we know. We know that there's a wide diversity of students out there. It's very complex. We have some students who are in very vulnerable circumstances. We recognize that we have a bit of a lower grad rate, as Superintendent Blady pointed out. We know we need to address that. We also know we need to improve our inclusive practices. We've heard from some of our secondary educators that when you go from an elementary school that's very holistic in nature, and when you go into a secondary school with a number of classrooms that students actually attend, sometimes at the grade 8 and grade 9 level, they may have 10, maybe upwards of 12 teachers at the grade 8 level and grade 9, depending on how they organize some of their elective rotations. And so we know that we really need to grow, address the grad rates. We need to promote our educated citizen. And we also know that the diversity is also coming with some of our newcomers who are coming, and they need some English language instruction that needs to be promoted. So some of our students who come to the secondary schools come with very little English. And when you don't arrive at the elementary, you're arriving at the secondary, we definitely need to put those supports in. So we know we need to move forward and enhance our supports in that area. So here's what we'll do at the secondary level. We definitely want to create some alignment and some coherence with our Island Connect education, with our learning alternatives, with VAST, along with Career Technical Center, because those are, we would consider them not our bricks and mortar schools, but actually our programs that need to be looked at holistically, and how can we actually put that team together, use some of the supports, grow the leadership so that they can work together, they can be a collaborative unit unto themselves, so we're looking forward to that. We also need to enhance our English language supports for all of our learners from 8 to 12. And we also need to look at how do we support those learning alternative areas around Aboriginal education, because we know that there's high representation in those particular learning environments that we want to support. So we really want to tighten that up and align those services. And then with regard to secondary transformation, moving forward around careers, we do know we need to give a little bit more time to our secondary school-based leaders. Many of them are in classrooms and teaching classrooms. They need to really work together in those large settings with staffs that are very large, who need a lot of support building that capacity in all of those particular areas. And then in addition, we really want to hone in, we're starting a student services appreciative scan, just to see how our learning services work out there. And that's really K-12, and I know that we have two great ladies in the back over here who will be leading that charge right now, and they're currently looking at a bit of a scan around how do we align our services across all of those areas. So that's what we're looking to do around secondary transformation. Oh goodness sakes, I was going to do it all together. Yeah. I should look at the next page. I will continue a little bit more here. I think I've really talked a lot about it. But I think with regard to those innovative learning environments at the grade 8 and 9 level, we have many schools who are creating interdisciplinary programs around how they construct their learning environments, which really supports collaboration. And I think that it's a bit of the nugget around collaboration at the grade 8 and 9 level. We have a K-9 transformed circumstance right now, but we also have an 8 to 12 learning system. So how do you bridge that gap? And we know that that's where the innovation is occurring right now. And when we get to the grade 10 implementation, we will be certainly looking at that because we'll be moving forward around that grad program. So we have a lot of questions out there, particularly from parents who may have students who are in grade 11 who are straddling both graduation programs. So we're definitely working on supports there as well. Any questions for our team?
Gratitude.
Yes, thanks.
We needed this today. This was awesome. Thank you.
John?
Thanks, guys. It's great listening to you from my end too, because I catch up on everything that's going on. It's always amazing. But I just wanted to bring it all kind of together. I think one of the themes of the presentations that the board has been watching and listening to is that a lot of the heavy lifting has occurred, and you're watching the systems start to move into moving out of the major technical changes that were necessary to do it, and you're observing a lot of the shifting into the implementation and creating continuity. The amazing part that I was pondering as I was listening to the team, and they were talking about all the communication tools that are being used in the different venues that they're occurring on. And I recall 3 or 4 years ago when we were in these conversations, and very little of that was occurring. When you talk about Meet and Eat and all those types of programs, you combine in the NDTA work that they're doing, you combine in the CUPE work that they're doing in alignment with blanket ceremonies, etc., and some of the work there. It's quite incredible, and the websites and the places to go to find information and etc. The portals were kind of visions and dreams because we didn't have the technology and or the time or effort or expertise to do it, and so these people have put that together. So I think the important thing as from my end, if I can, stressing the idea that we're undergoing massive shifts and changes. We have the tools in place to continue to do it, and we need to continue into the implementation stage, and continue with the development of the continuity for our field and our staff out there. They're the ones that are now experiencing the massive shifts. They weren't aware of kind of what was going on before, and now they're seeing the realities of what's happening, and so that overwhelming, although we kind of get an idea of where we're going, they're still catching up to us, right? And so we have to have the patience of letting the system catch up to us and helping tweak with them, supporting them and moving forward. And I think it's really important that we take some time and opportunity to allow that to happen. So I think this is bang on. I appreciate the areas where you've identified. And the pieces that the board needs to understand that you, out of all the presentations, received a 30,000-foot descriptor of what's going on in each department. So there's data and there's information and analysis on everything. And if you want to dig down, you need to ask us, individually, privately. We will find it for you. But for us to get up and present everything, we would be here as we used to, just dealing with the budget for hours and hours and hours and hours of data and columns of accounting. And we're taking a direction from the board that that's not something the board wants to have a full understanding of what's going on. So please feel free for the next month that if there's inquiries about certain pieces of information, we'll do our best to find that for you. We'll share it with the board. I think we're going to have an information and budget opportunities and some different times to meet with the board to explain some of the things, and that'd be good opportunities for us. And we can also create presentations for you if there's some specifics that you're interested in.
Thanks very much. Great presentation. Thanks.
One more question, Trustee Berzovich?
Can we go back quickly to that slide on the reading levels? And I can't look at it, I'm gonna go over here. And I'm, oh, there you go. I know, is it going down a little, or no, it's fairly flat? Like at what, like it does sort of look like there's a little bit of a tiny bit of a downward trend again. Am I seeing that right? From 2012 to 2015? Is it just a little?
It's very little.
Yeah, and I guess that's my question is statistically, at what point, what percentage, or, you know, at what point do we start to look at those percentages and go, oh, we've got a trend here?
Grade 4, or you're referring to the grade 4 or all of it?
No, I'm turned in terms of the bars.
Which
like,
bar though? The
blue bars.
The blue bar.
The blue bar. Because the grade 4
Well,
is.
we addressed, if I could, we addressed grade 4 through the creation of focus schools and start to develop some data and strategies to work with that. So next step would be to enlarge that if we believe that our analysis was correct. We do believe it's correct, so that's the direction we're going. So we're dealing with that, which in effect creates support and shifts and changes for the grade 12 reading level as well.
Okay.
The other end of it, the district secondary transformation and information there is also picking up the other pieces of engaging students at a later place to make sure we're supporting them as well. And I see Robin getting up too, so she's got.
Not necessarily, I was just.
Yeah.
You're caught there.
I think that's what we have to do is look at both ends right now. We have
Yeah.
to look at the early learning and ensure that, but we also have to look at this graduation rate in order to certainly provide some intervention at a later time in order to support our kids.
So it's past time.
Yeah.
Laura has a-
Laura?
I just want to reemphasize that, and probably should have said it earlier. We've acknowledged the context of our district, and then we've tried to paint this picture where we've got the, if you can imagine sort of this continuum, we've got this focus on early years to inform future, but we also have a focus on secondary or those later years as well to close that gap. And
yeah.
John said, like, we have lots of data that goes down deeper, and if you may recall, you may not recall from the Focus Schools presentation, you had more tables, and we took both so longitudinal data as well as snapshots in time, and the longitudinal data, 3 years, following the same cohort, it's increasing. So what we're doing in the Focus Schools is increasing the reading, and it's closing the gap between average and non-average.
Just as someone who's genuinely interested in this stuff, I may ask to take a look. Yeah. Go deeper.
And just on that, it actually you brought up a thought in my mind as well, is that in the past in different schools there was support given specifically to schools around small schools. Support would be extra staffing at secondary level, gifted and enriched. Some schools receive more than others, so there were all these types of different supports in a kind of a scattergram approach. Because of the system was becoming old, in the sense of creation of a Band-Aid here by a group of people, another creation over here, another creation over here. Because of becoming sustainable, and as we walk through that, a lot of those things were stripped out. And so this was that whole conversation about how do we rebuild back. Right. We just didn't want to put it back. I made the comment about we have to learn how to spend our money. And data-rich decision-making, creating an inquiry question about how do we improve grade 4 reading levels, doing some practice out there in the focus schools, exploring whether or not that works or not. And now we're coming back, learning services coming back and says, this is how we want to move forward with how do we supplement certain schools. Not all schools, because budget is going to dictate where we kind of end up with it.
Trustee Robinson? Oh, just following up, Laura, you were talking about graduates, if you will, from the K to 3, and that the learning, the success level was going up. Have you got a percentage on that, or an idea of how much, or
What the increase
is it significant, or?
I think it's significant. I don't know what our marker for significant is, but I don't have it memorized. I'm trying to picture the graph so that we have more than half the students that are now either meeting or exceeding. That used to be the old language. So 1, 2, 3, 4. They're in the 3 and 4 categories. Yeah, and where the growth, oddly, I'm not sure if it's oddly or not, where a ton of the growth has occurred is in the 4 category. Right, so these kids are exceeding expectations for the grade level. More, it's grown significantly.
Excellent. Scott?
Yeah, so I think the data is very clear. If we get to the kids when they're young, that's sort of a recipe for success. And that's wonderful, and it's great that we've got the focus schools, and it's great that we want to expand the focus schools. And I think that there's an acknowledgement that that's great for the younger kids who are moving through the system, but it'll be a while before they move through. And we're obviously faced with the grad rates that we are being reported with in the newspaper, and they're not, anything to really brag or write home about. So there is a focus then on an immediate need for those students who are not young, who are no longer younger, who are about ready to exit the system, and we need to put in supports for them. So can you talk to me a little bit about what those supports look like and what sort of efforts and where we think we should be putting our money and our energy into?
Okay, I'll start with Mr. So maybe we didn't emphasize it as much, but the reading initiatives, the reading, writing, numeracy, those are K to 9. So let's establish that. That's not just K to 3. Focus schools is for sure K to 3, but a lot of the other initiatives are K to 9. And so that the NLPS reading assessment really has shifted what we do here in so many ways, on so many levels, because it now has a certain and clear as to what kids are expected to, where they're expected to be in a particular grade. It tells us how to assess it. We're kind of learning now that I know this information, what do I do with it? This is powerful, powerful stuff. And so it's really shifted our system. As well, colleagues are coming together collaboratively. All those pieces are happening in K-12. One of the things that we noticed, and I might have touched on it a little bit when I talked about the ABED piece, and then Robin, you talked about it a little bit later, is we're trying to bring some coherence. I'll give you one example. Some coherence to the notion of outreach. So we've got a number of students that live in our geographic region that maybe don't attend school, or they're attending different programs or what have you. So we're starting to build those concerted efforts to figure out who are they, why are they not here, and then what are we going to do about that. And so those things, some of those things may or may not have been happening, and they weren't happening, or they were happening in isolation. So we're trying to bring, for example, coherence to Island Connect Ed, for example, learning alternatives and Aboriginal education together, for example, to address that, because they might have been partly addressing it separately, but not together. So we're looking at a district-wide approach to all those kids, right? And finding out every single student, where are they, why are they not here, and how are we going to get them back in? As well as making secondaries in conversation with, again, Aboriginal education, with district staff, every kid 8 to 12. If they're not there, why are they not there? If it's high absenteeism, we need to have sort of indications of what have the interventions been, and that accountability piece we're working on that as well.
And I think that the whole notion behind the new curriculum was to address that, is what do kids need, how do we personalize it, how do we find their passion, how do we intervene when they're not doing well. So it really is individualized to find some of those kids. Because I think that, and I know Assistant Superintendent Saywell did his report around how many kids would change our graduation rate. I remember it well. I think it was 45. 45. So if you find those kids and you work with them specifically, you address maybe some of their needs, and I think some of the needs might be mental health needs, could be some of the supports that we have to put in place around anxiety, why they can't come to school. So we just need to find those places and spaces for kids to really connect to have that school connectedness. And it may be in some of those other programs.
And secondary is not excluded from any of these, the new curriculum, and some of the major philosophical or pedagogical shifts that are occurring within the new curriculum. Elementary, we got the curriculum a little earlier. They're generalists in that elementary teachers have to teach all these subject areas, so they might be a little bit more nimble in kind of being cross-curricular. Secondary got their curriculum a little bit later. And because often they're specialists, like I might be a math teacher and a PE teacher, I don't teach all these other subjects. For me to work and to teach maybe in a cross-curricular way is going to take a little bit of practice. So at the secondary level, their curriculum came a little bit later, but they're also transforming to a new way of competencies versus sort of content. And they're not immune to any of that. They're the same changes that are happening at elementary are happening at secondary as well. And that's all about student engagement.
Yeah, thanks.
And if I could put a bow on that. So our mantra is educative, preventative, and restorative in our practice. So of course, we're an education system. We are focused on putting educational supports in place for our kids K to 12. The prevention piece is through education, and we want to make sure that we're addressing mental health. We want to make sure that we're addressing addictions. Addictions is another significant issue that we're battling in our school district, as are many districts in the province. But we want to address that out front, face to face. So we want to increase the capacity of our support staff and our teachers to work on that curriculum. So when I say that's our practice, it's also our response. So if we're noticing that we're missing kids, if we're missing those 45 or maybe 90, let's go get them. Let's increase the resources we have K to 12 so that we can address that. And then the restorative piece is we want to make sure that we are building the well-rounded, educated citizen in our school district. So we don't want to be punitive, we want to be restorative in all of our processes.
Let me just close the circle on that.
A bow on a bow?
There might be an opportunity to support those programs with a little more counseling time, student support, teacher time, and child youth family support worker time.
Great, thanks.
You almost got away, we called you back, and now we can't get rid of you. No, that's been really, yeah, they're right on it now, I think. That's been amazing. We're doing fabulous, fabulous work. You're not getting away yet.
Thank you. I'm going to try and come up with a question since this was a question. Through the chair, I just want to say that hearing about, from a parent perspective and what we've seen in the last, probably about the last year with the trend around mental health, anxiety education that parents are out there seeking. We've had multiple schools bring in anxiety speakers for parents and kids right now. We know that we're seeing that younger and younger, and the kids that are slipping through the cracks and the parents that don't know what to do, or that's starting to really go into our secondary schools, and then that's where we're losing the kids, and we're seeing that. So knowing that there's a focus on that and trying to figure out how we can reach out to those kids so we don't lose them. I'm not going to ask a question, I'm going to break the rule. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Big surprise, broke the rule.
Thank you.
Correspondence referred from the regular board. I don't believe we have any. Unfinished business, none. New business. Trustee Higginson.
This is super quick. I had an email from Elka today that the deadline for registering for the BCSTA AGM is coming up. So if you want to go, please let Elka know by Friday.
Oh, okay.
If you haven't already, a number of trustees have let her know whether they're going or not, but if you haven't, please let her know, because the hotel is also filling up as well, and then it means you have to pay more money somewhere else and not be at the same hotel. So please let her know by Friday if you plan to go. I hope that is all that she needed us to say. So that's it.
Questions from the gallery? Do I have a motion to bring the meeting to an end? Trustee Higginson.
Yes, do you need a second?
Seconded.
Do we need this second?
Yeah.
President?
I'm in favor.
Are you?
Yeah.
All in favor, yeah.